Let me now introduce our speaker. We are privileged to have Chris Kraus with us today. Chris is Worksoft's Director of Product Management for Certify and an expert in the field of test automation. Over the past 20 years, he has served in a wide variety of engineering and project management roles, including most recently for CA Technologies. Today, Chris is responsible for the strategic direction of Worksoft's flagship product and automated business process testing platform, Worksoft Certify. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Mark. So, hello everyone. I'm excited to talk to you about building a risk-based practice for SAP. So here's our agenda. Let's talk a little bit about how change is working in the industry and specifically to SAP, and then how do you build your risk-based testing strategy specific to SAP, introduce Certify, and then do a demo and go for questions and answers. So this is a great quote from Gartner. By 2020, 60% of digital businesses will experience a major service failure because of IT's inability to manage digital risk and new technology and use cases. So of course this is kind of a fear-fed factor, but in reality it actually happens. Everybody's heard about problems around Black Friday, Cyber Monday, getting ready for Christmas, or it could be something simple as Valentine's and Mother's Day, and you're crashed a nap trying to buy flowers at the last minute. Our digital presence is pervasive, but we need to remember that digital presence is backed up by a lot of major ERP functionality, the complete supply chain, sales and distribution management behind that. So it may not be the website that's crashed, like we've seen, it could be the actual provisioning and the ordering and management of getting the application or the products and goods to the customers themselves. So agility has never been more important. So this is a really interesting study from McKinsey. Everybody talks about the unicorns. Hey, Facebook says updates into production every 10 minutes. Amazon does this, those type of things. But in reality, what they've found at the corporate level is you don't have to be a unicorn. You can actually be a well-established major corporation as long as you have the attributes of change and alignment for that. So what these statistics show on the left is literally ensuring a digital strategy is aligned to the corporate strategy. So at a corporate level, you're very concerned about your B2C presence and actually getting goods and supply chain into the customer's hands. If you do that, you're 55% more successful over 23. Having a high strategic response to digital change, well, you can see there what's very interesting. They talk about production and product distribution, ecosystems, processes, and supply chain. Well, in reality, 3 of those are very core modules that people run in SAP. Sales and distribution, warehouse management, supply chain management. You've got FICO for processes also, right? So just because you're working with an ERP package and you say, hey, this is old school, I'm implementing a package, doesn't mean that if it's aligned to the corporate initiatives, getting those things up faster and being more agile is not material to the growth of the company and quite honestly, profitability. So there's some great things we've seen out here. Demand cutting-edge digital agility to extend to operations and organizational aspects of digital maturity. Well, easy for them to say, not for me, right? But in what the statistics show is actually there's more revenue growth for companies who are aligned in their strategies. And it doesn't have to be something airy-fairy about Uber or Facebook. It's quite literally, these are the run your business initiatives. Okay, and SAP Changes Content. So obviously, if you're familiar with SAP and moving from ECC6 into HANA, R3 to S4, those type of things, this is a no-brainer. But what we have to step back is and say, 15 years ago, the discrete change events, the ones in the yellow-orange, we would actually go through this saying, hey, we have a merger and acquisition, or we have our Y2K event, or we need to align a business process to a new module. Businesses would kind of stop, IT would pause, and everything would align and work with that together, kind of like in a rugby match. Now, the difference is, these days, we can't all align on one goal. To run your business and your run maintain has to keep going. Even though you have a consolidation of, say, multiple ERP packages into one, maybe that's because you're going to Simple Finance or Sales and Distribution in HANA, that doesn't mean you can stop everything else. You still have to put your service packs, you still have custom development going in for regulatory things, say HIPAA compliance, all those things. You still have lots of small initiatives going on in the changes. So obviously, our changing events are very business-driven. There's a lot of compliance ones. I have to do this because it's a new year. There's HIPAA privacy, different compliances there. And there's new drivers. People want to get towards, say, HANA, or they want to get towards web-enabled SAP. The key is we cannot stop running our business, like all those things we do day to day, because we have those big events. So we need to think about how do I decrease the time to implement changes and roll with the change event? How do I improve the implementation performance and mitigate risk and leverage accelerators and measure adoption? These are big things for us in the SAP realm. So I know this is an old slide. This is actually a statistic back from 2013. There's an ASUG survey where people said the major costs and time factoring during upgrades and implementations by customers. They're saying 75% of people said that their number one challenge was QA and testing. 86% of customers are actually concerned about the risk due to lack of comprehensive testing. In complexity and project schedules are rated much lower compared to the rest. So in reality, in 2013, we said testing and QA was a big risk. Well, roll back time. Think about how many transports you implemented in 2013. Every customer of mine I talk to, and I love talking to them all the time, they all align. They do like 3,000 transports a year. They are no longer doing quarterly updates to SAP. They're doing bi-weekly or weekly updates. So this was identified as a gap in 2013, and I can tell you there was no magic wand that this went away. It's just more compounded. It is still a big pain because our velocity and our number of updates is changing. We are getting more agile in the SAP practices. So what is that top testing pain point? So in a 2016 survey, what we found is the complexity is getting much greater. People are implementing multiple SAP modules, and they're connecting them to other external systems. It could be, say, a content master on your mainframe, could be Salesforce for ordering. But there's a lot of touch points with internal systems and external systems. Maybe you've outsourced your delivery system to Brown or someone like that. There are a lot more integrations to those external systems along with the internal systems. And multi-component development efforts is greatly increasing weight and downtime because a lot of people, when they think about a change in SAP, maybe I'm just the SD guy. I've done my VA01, I've done my sales and distribution. But in reality, that is integrated. Maybe it's a point-to-point integration, but it is integrated to the warehouse management, materials management, and transportation management. So you can't test one small part of a global end-to-end workflow and not expect things to break. What this bar chart shows is how many customers are saying that their number of interfaces or connections is increasing because they're actually connecting, their warehouse management and their sales and distribution and their transportation management systems together. The complexity of these systems really renders duplication of QA and development at extremely high cost. We need to figure out a better way to handle this because when we think about our end-to-end testing, it is literally end-to-end. And we have great statistics here for SAP process integration that proves our SAP systems are highly integrated. So what are those risks? So a classic thing to think about is how do you define risk-based testing? It's a method for prioritizing the test based on the risk of their failure because testers cannot test everything with available resources. Usually it starts early in the project lifecycle. So a great quote from the Journal of Computer Applications. So what is an unclear, purely defined requirement? Well, quite honestly, if you get a transport from SAP, you may or may not understand what the change is inside of there. What transactions are being touched, what programs are being touched. Other times, it may be some custom ABAP code that but in general, when we're doing high velocity changes, no one has a deep due diligence knowledge of that. Okay, complexity, like the last slide shows, our systems are interconnected. The number of integration connectivity across multiple products is increasing. So there's technical risk there, right? And then there's the scheduling. You know, how do we manage that, keep the business running, all those transports and service packs and fixes that go in, while we adopt big project-based initiatives at the same time. In my chart 3 slides ago, with the orange slides and the blue and the dark brown, we know that business doesn't stop for a major upgrade or consolidation. In one part of the business, you have to support everything. So there's scheduling conflicts. You know, where do I put my QA resources? Do I put them on the project or on the run maintain, or split them and get no coverage anywhere? So when we talk about risk-based testing, these are kind of our 3 levers of things we need to address. So what are the benefits of risk-based testing? Obviously, we need to prioritize tests based on the ability to discover defects, you know, and it's not just defects. What we need to understand are what are the core run-the-business processes. Everybody loves to talk about negative tests, you know, rainy day scenarios, but in reality, those don't produce money for your company. It is your, you know, top 10 core business processes, say sales orders into the distribution center. That order to cash overarching process. What are the key processes that have to run so your order to cash works, your procure to pay works, okay? We need to then figure out how do we allocate resources to make sure that those positive paths that bring us the money, the traction in our business are actually working, and we need to increase our testing efficiency around those. The other thing is, we know because we're doing more projects, we're getting more agile in our deliveries. Quite honestly, customers, 3,000 transports a year is normal. I've heard companies who have 3,000 a month, right? How do we actually compress the testing window? Because we can't get more efficient in development. We hear a lot about DevOps and continuous delivery. That's all about getting development and deployment faster, but everybody's forgot about how do you make user acceptance and your end-to-end business process validation just as efficient. Well, reality is we need to start running our tests in parallel. If we run 500 tests, 10 at a time, it's going to take 1/10 of the time as if we ran them serially in a manual manner. So we need to think about optimizing and compressing our test windows. So our big challenge and what we need to do with risk-based testing is we need to manage change and actually go faster. So now I'm going to set up what I'm seeing in the industry, and I'm sure, you know, if you have the little nod button or the smiley button in your GoToMeeting, you say, yeah, we agree, we hear these pressures every day. You probably have corporate initiatives to deliver new functionality to the business faster, or reduce your defect rates in production. You need to have your core order to cash, procure to pay, those mission critical business processes running as fast as possible. So there is a need for risk-based testing, and now we have 3 levers to measure that. So what is Worksoft? Worksoft is a global organization, offices in Dallas, London, UK, and Munich. We're actually formed in 1998. We have a diverse global 5,000 customer base, and we have worldwide support and services. What we actually do is we innovate on technology. We're the first to market with business process testing, first to market with process mining for SAP. We do focus on enterprise applications like SAP, Salesforce, Workday, Oracle, all of those core ERP and business applications that run your business. We have 5 patents awarded, 2 more in process, and we're ranked #1 in the Gartner Quadrant for automated testing of packaged applications. That is our sweet spot, right? And the nice thing is, if you look at those applications, Salesforce has web, Oracle, SAP have web, they have the classic kind. So that means we do have to understand everything from simulating a process with a SOA test, to testing an SAP GUI, to actually working with, say, HTML5 and the new web applications that SAP is providing. The nice thing is we have a great eco-partner system. So we're a strong SAP partner. We have leading SAP partnerships. We have a thriving community. So it's easy to find people who know Worksoft and know how to use it. And we get a lot of information from them and co-deployment. So how would you actually manage your change currently? So in Europe, I was just there for our EMEA customer group. It was amazing. Out of the people, probably 75 to 80% were solution manager customers. So as they think about the very classic solution manager approach to this, what you need to do is log in. You're going to define a blueprint. So you have to go figure out what my business process is, what is the chain of T codes I'm running. Then I activate a T-bomb and I start running those transactions. And then BPCA can do the work. Now, the nice thing is, if you've got the luxury of getting accurate blueprints constantly updated as you make change, and you have the time to run your transactions with the T-bombs, this dynamic code analysis is amazing. It's deep. It tells you lots of things. The problem is, what I found is a lot of people don't actually run through all that rigor. A lot of my customers say, my system of record for tests and requirements is in Quality Center. It's an IBM Rational. I'm moving towards QA Symphony or Jira. And so we don't use a lot of Solution Manager for that. So if you do, it's great. And we do actually have customers who build their T-bombs by running automated tests. The problem is it's pretty heavy-handed. There's a lot of tax around running T-bombs and keeping them up to date. The trick is keeping them up to date. But it's amazing dynamic code analysis. Now, how would I actually manage change with that? Is there a different approach? So Worksoft, Certify, and Impact have been around forever. Impact has probably been around just over 5 years. And what we literally do is we use static code analysis. So we load a transport. We actually look at the transport that's being changed. We see the transactions, the programs, and the objects are being affected. So we can tell you what's inside there. So in my 3 prongs to solve for risk-based testing, the first gray one is, well, what's the change? So literally, this should be gray. It's what is the change? We'll tell you what's in that transport. Okay, then what we'll do is we'll overlay your existing certified process libraries with that. So we'll say you've hit VL01, VL01N, and so forth. We know the T codes, we know the programs, we know the objects. So when we create, say, a UI test on SAP GUI, we're just not saying put in distribution center or channel. What happens is we understand and map that down to the object level. So we can say this data that a user entered on the screen in SAP GUI is actually correlated to an object in a window, and that overlaps with a transport change. So we're not just hitting, like Selenium, airy-fairy clicks on a screen. We actually have deep knowledge of the data infrastructure. What this does is allows us to do the analysis to say, really, you are testing these things that are changing with your certified processes. It's not a guess. The other thing is, how do you figure out the risk? And that's the key for risk-based testing. What have I not tested? So, you know, it could be that I haven't tested any of my rainy day scenarios or my negative test cases. You know, if they're really a 0.01% rainy day test, who cares? But what happens if one of your core, say, procure-to-pay processes or order-to-cash processes is missing? What we will do is we will overlay, okay, what do you not have automated test coverage? We'll then put the SCO3 use data on top of that so you can figure out what is the actual transactions I have to augment, what's my risk? So if I have very low risk, I have transactions all covered, that's great. If I'm ending up with 10 T codes that actually have no coverage and are highly used, SCO3 will tell me that, that's going to know my risk itself. So that's our point. How do we figure out that risk of problems? So the advantages of actually using Impact is it happens in the background. Every time a new transport is loaded into your QA system, we have a background task. We're going to analyze it and store the results in the database. So we are constantly validating those things and figuring out what's there. So that when you open Impact and you say, okay, what's my change? I see it immediately. I get my test overlays with my current coverage and my certified processes. And then what happens is we can then stage them to run into the Worksoft Execution Manager, or I can stage them in a lab and Quality Center to run. So the nice thing is I can very quickly get to an actual task of running automated tests there with Execution Manager. And then the insights is I can actually tell you, if you wanted a graphical view of this, you can import them into our Annalise product, and we can show you not only the processes that are discovered, but actually the impact analysis and the SO3 usage on top of those visually, if you're a very visual learner. Okay, so how does this work? So Worksoft Analyze, as part of our product suite, it lets you visualize and discover your business processes. Maybe you actually use this to discover what your blueprints are for BPCA. We can mine SAP processes to tell you what your as-is business processes are, and then we provide advanced analytics on top of there. So we can overlay your impact analysis, your SS3 data, and so forth. Worksoft Certify is our flagship product for actually doing visual authoring of automated test cases. We take pride in the fact that we do a really good job of business process testing of your end-to-end processes. Impact feeds in there so we can do our risk-based testing. And we've done a lot of optimization for our packaged apps out of the box. So if you're in hybrid or Workday, something that's web-based, it's great. We've already figured out how to test that for you. Then the operations suite is how do we actually do our lights-out testing, run those things in parallel. We provide multi-tenancy because we realize companies, even though they're all under one umbrella, different divisions look like multi-tenants in many locations. And then we actually allow you to run your tests through Execution Manager in a very elastic, dynamic way. So I mentioned before, when it comes to risk-based testing and that time crunch, if I have 500 tests, I may need to run them 10 at a time in parallel to cut my testing time in a tenth. That's what I mean by that. Okay. So what does Worksoft Impact really provide for risk-based testing for SAP? So Certify Impact minimizes the time required to test the changes as they're brought into the SAP landscape. So we can see a transport, identify what's changed, and run the right test for you. Okay. The key features is that it's automatic, so it happens in the background. You don't have to run T-bombs. You don't have blueprints updated like you do with BPCA. We have automatic identification made by the transports. We identify the appropriate tests in the Worksoft library, and it integrates into BPCA. If you do have the T-bombs, we can use that as the analysis engine to do the snapping. And the nice thing is it actually works in real time. So it sounds awesome, but what is the negative, or what use case are we not good for? It's not for comparing two SAP systems or for code analysis or reporting of object level changes. We actually are focusing on the actual T codes and programs associated with them. If you need to go down to those low-level code analysis and things, you're going to use BPCA to do that because it's a much more fine-tuned instrument for fine, small changes. So this is the approach. How does this actually work? So when you're working with SAP and you've got your ABOP stack, which many, many people in the world enjoy, you've got a transport that comes in to your, we identify the QA environment. We then do the impact analysis by looking at the T codes, the programs, and the objects that are changing. We then map that to the T codes, programs, and objects that we know you have certified processes for. And then we define the overlap and actually then tell you what tests are run. So you can start building that validation across those. So remember, the key is when Certified tests something, we're not just clicking labels in the UI. We actually understand what's behind channel and distribution number and so forth in the SAP environment. So we can actually map at the object and program level transports to your test coverage. So some technical people want to know, well, how far does it go down? So quite literally, it's the transaction to the calling program, your include programs, your function modules, your structures, your tables, your fields, data elements, and domain. So when we actually do the analysis of the transport and the ABOP programs, we actually go all the way down at the object level to figure out what's changing. So, we're very comfortable with the fact that we're finding the right program and identifying what doesn't have coverage itself. So impact and action. So what I'm going to show you in this demo is we're going to analyze change and identify things that could be a major update, it could be a small service pack, your run and maintain environment. It doesn't matter what type of change. We're going to use impact to identify the change. Then we're going to identify the tests that match that, and we'll see that, and then we'll automatically execute them. Now, the key is, where's the risk? So if we know we have high coverage on automated tests, we will have less risk. There's no one who's going to say testing your business critical processes more often doesn't reduce risk. What we will do is identify the gaps. So where are things that aren't tested? What do we actually maybe need to go manually address or build automation on? So I'm going to flip to the demo. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with entering a name. So I've got my sales order number 35, and I'm adding a description there, and I'll add my email address. So I'm kicking off that I'm going to start an impact analysis. Next. So now I'm going to point to the system. I'm going to point to my QA system. And then I'm going to go query for transfers. Obviously, you could have 3,000 transfers out there. You can enter part of transfer number, an owner, a description, a date range to like whittle those down. And now I actually get a list of the transports that match. So in this case, you can see this one has the same number, and these are the VA1 sales order changes. So this is what I'm interested in actually running my transport analysis against. I could multi-select this or single select it, it's fine. So I'll select this and go next. And then what's happening is we're starting to analyze the transports, get the data, and I can see the changes. So in reality, what I can see is there's programs on the left, transactions on the right. So the transactions on the right are things you're probably very familiar with, VA1, VA02, and so forth. These are the programs and call programs underneath there that do the work. So I'm going to leave all those checked, and I'm going to map to my certified library. So the idea is I've identified what's changing. So that was my first of the 3 steps. That was the gray circle. Now I'm going to go actually identify my actual certified processes. So in my functional test area, I'm going to say I'm going to overlay those with my change. And this is where we're doing the T code, the program, and the object mapping together to figure out what subset of my test should be used. So now I've got a list of tasks. Now the nice thing is I've overlaid my STO3 data. So what this means is I've actually replicated my production use counts, STO3, to development. I can see that I've got 4070 transactions, I've got 7,435 iterations, and that one test case, that very first one, actually has 4 out of the 5 key codes that I'm worried about validating. So that's really awesome. The other thing is we know historically how long it took to run. So we know it takes about a quarter hour to run this. So when I actually go to stage these to run, I know it's reasonable that in about 20 minutes or so, I could actually run a validation and get a high coverage. So that last thing in the 3 circles was, what's my risk? What is not tested? So if we look here, I can see VA33 was actually used 23 times. So in your environment, based on your STO3 data, this may be a small risk, or this could be, maybe this was 2,300 times. So it means there's actually a lot of usage of this transaction, but we don't have coverage. So from a risk-based testing standpoint, my certified processes that I have aligned up very well to my impact analysis, but this is missing. So I have an option here. I need to actually go build an automated test for this, maybe use Annalise to go search this transaction, see how people are using it, or run a manual test. So this has actually identified the risk for this release. It's possible that based on my STO3 data, there's 23 people who use this, and I do not have an automated test on it. So I just have to figure out how comfortable I am with that. Okay, so these are the ones that do not have test coverage. So this is my core risk. Now, what I can do here is actually start pointing to Execution Manager, and I actually can take these tests and load them to run. I can actually schedule them. So the idea is from here, I'm going to say this is a collection of tests that I found that map to the changes that impact found in my transport, and I can schedule them to run. In our Execution Manager, we'll go run them in parallel. Or I can use Quality Center, and I can push these into a test lab in Quality Center, and then from Quality Center run my certified processes. That way I have a single point of truth for my test results if I'm commingling multiple testing tools itself. So I'll come back to my PowerPoint. There we go. So hopefully the demonstration kind of explained that yes, there's a lot of crazy technical stuff that goes on in the background, but in reality, it's very simple. We figured out what's in a transport, so what do we need to test. We've mapped it to my library of automated tests and certified so I can know my coverage. And then I've shown the third thing is what is my risk. I've identified transactions that are being changed in the transport, and so we saw some things had no STO3 data, so we don't use it, it doesn't matter. The one VA33 we actually use, so we have some risk there. We actually are not covering that. Okay? So our goal is to minimize the time and resources required to test changes in SAP. You know, we want to focus our resources specifically on what's new and different that we actually use. This helps us identify and recommend the programs to execute and actually get the largest amount of coverage possible. So when we actually look at these proposed changes in the SAP application, we actually do want to make sure that we only need to test things that rely to our critical business processes. What are in procure to pay or order to cash that I actually use, not the rainy day scenario. Okay, and in reality, this will help us increase quality. Because when we execute our end-to-end business processes and we validate them, one of my slides earlier, we talked about that our SAP systems are highly integrated. No one just runs warehouse management or sales and distribution or materials management or supply chain or transportation management. They're running all of them integrated together, or they're running Salesforce or Workday, you know, different applications working together to make this end-to-end process work. So what we really need to do is safeguard and identify what's changing and make sure we test those end-to-end processes. So yes, Worksoft's been around a long time. We've got great customers that we work with, but it's good to have feedback from external parties. So IDC actually did a very nice study and showed that Worksoft extends automation and drives business agility. So the ROI for implementing something like Certified for Automated Testing and Impact Analysis is 273%. You know, for this customer, net present value is $11 million and payback was 11.9 months. And it's because they could actually increase automation, so they actually are doing more testing before they go to production. I know a lot of people test in production, it's great. We call that end users. They've improved their productivity because they're not spending time manually testing things. Let the computer do that, focus on building automation, and lots of some defects were cut by 44%. Because the problem is when you get a defect in production, you've got 10 boots on the call trying to figure out what the problem is and how to remediate it. So there's a lot of time wasted doing that. So from their standpoint, they're actually looking for more seamless automation and fewer starts and stops in regression testing, which obviously Worksoft fills that gap. We had customers who went from 50 to 80% of their regression tests were actually automated. So it's a great way to quantify this, that yes, you can take a risk-based approach for testing. There is a methodology behind it, the 3 pillars, and there's actually quantifiable tools to help you do it. Okay? So at this point, I'm going to let Mark open up the lines for Q&A, and we'll see if people have questions.
Thank you, Chris. As a reminder, if you do have a question, you can use the question feature and go to webinar and submit those to Chris at any time. So the first question, can I use Impact with manual testing?
Actually, you can, because when we do the transport analysis, we will show you the T codes and the programs that are changing. So if you don't have a very large automated library, and like in the demo, that third screen showed what our risk was, what we didn't have coverage, you can actually then figure out what T codes don't have tests and actually, you know, focus your manual tests on there. So it's possible. You can have a blend, and then ideally, if you're manually testing your mission critical higher velocity processes, you need to go automate that.
Okay, we did have a question. Somebody missed a couple of slides, and as a reminder to everyone, we will send out a recording of this webinar. You should get that either later today or tomorrow. So if you missed anything, just rest assured that you will receive a recording. Our next question, you referred to a change management approach using Solman and mentioned T-bombs. Can you explain what a T-bomb is?
So a T-bomb is a trace bill of materials. So when you use Solution Manager and the VPCA, it's actually a dynamic code analysis. What you do is you start a trace, so a T-bomb. You then run through your transactions according to your blueprint. You turn it off, and then it does dynamic code analysis and figures out what transactions you ran, say VA1, VLO1 in, VLO2 in, VA33, and so forth, and then identifies the programs, the objects, and low-level changes there. So T-bomb is a way to actively start a trace in your SAP system. Now, the trick is every time you add a transport, or you change your business process, you have to go refresh those. So there's some maintenance behind them. And you may have to refresh them every week. We do have customers who are highly automated, and what they do is they run their certified processes for the end-to-end business process testing with the trace active, so that they're constantly refreshing their T-bomb, so they know all the data that's changing there. And then their certified processes are linked into Solution Manager. Think of Solution Manager as something similar to Quality Center to manage your environment, your test cases. It also does change management outside of there, and your system monitoring and so forth. So that's what it is. It's a trace bill of material.
Okay, our next question. Dave asks, does Impact pick up all the sub-processes as well as end-to-end processes? Is it confusing in terms of knowing what to test?
No, it actually understands that. So you start out with say a T code. You've got a program called the second program, a program called the third program. So our analysis engine understands how to walk that tree and see transactions rely on multiple programs call other programs. So it's pretty easy from our standpoint. We do all the heavy lifting in the analysis engine. So you really don't have to worry about that. It just happens naturally. So you wouldn't have to worry about there was a sub-program or one program linking to another one. We handle that in our analysis engine. That's kind of the point of the impact analysis, to not do that by hand.
Okay. What is the difference in output between Solman, BPCA, and Impact during analysis of the transport?
So we are doing static code analysis. So we will tell you the transactions, the programs, and the objects have changed. You can get those through BPCA, and BPCA will also give you lower level change steps. You can actually see what's changing, say, at an ABOP program level. So from our standpoint in testing, we don't need to understand changes in the program and say compare them. What we need to know is our end-to-end business process was affected by the change. So you can think of, if your goal is to survey a mountain and understand where there's creeks and trees, Impact is going to give that high-level picture, and it's going to tell you how to navigate along the creek to get to a bridge. BPCA is actually going to go to the next level deeper. It's going to tell you how wide the river is. It's going to tell you how deep the water is in the river. And then you'll eventually get to the bridge. So BPCA just gives you much lower levels of detail, and from a change management and risk-based testing, you don't need those. It's something maybe an ABOPer would actually need, that low level, how deep is the river at one point or another. So we're going to give you the bigger picture and actually enough to navigate to a change, where BPCA gives you much lower level detail. Think of it as like more granularity on a map itself.
Okay, great. Our next question in relation to end-to-end testing, is Impact able to highlight the risks with SAP portal transactions?
Right. So anything that's positioned in a transport. So yes. So SAP portal and your web GUIs and those, behind them are ABOP programs and transport. And so we're actually analyzing at that transaction level. So we see those differences, yeah.
So we actually had a question, is this a live session or a recorded session? Right now, this is a live session.
Yes, this is live session today.
Okay, the next question, let's see. Do I need additional licensing for Impact?
Yes, so within the Certify suite, you've got Certify, which is your automated test harness. You've got Execution Manager, and you've got Impact. And those are complementary products that can be bundled in to Certify. So some customers have it, some customers don't. But it's an additional add-on to the core Certify product.
If T-bomb and BPCA is not configured properly or at all, will Impact still work?
Yes, yes. You do not need to have a blueprint or T-bomb for Impact. We actually have our own code, and think of an ABOP program or transport you load. We do all the analysis with our own code. So we do not need BPCA or T-bombs to work, which is kind of the advantage. You don't have to keep those updated. We schedule, and every transfer that comes into your QA system, we're going to pre-analyze and give the results. So we do not need those.
We have some great questions coming in. As a reminder, if you do want to submit a question to Chris, you can use the question feature at any time to do that. We'll get to as many as we can, and for any we don't get to, we'll get back to you with a reply after the webinar. Our next question. Does Impact gather information for a specific SAP user or the entire test system?
So Impact is doing it at the transport level. So it's basically any changes to the system itself. Your SCO3 data is going to be use counts across the system itself. So Impact is not limited by users by any way. It's more of what's changing in the system itself.
Okay, we have a question about moving to S4HANA. I think basically the question is asking, is Worksoft able to play well with S4HANA?
Oh yes, of course. 1610, 1509, yes, we have customers actively using those and testing. Yeah, works great.
Is there anything in particular that a customer or an individual would need to do if they move to S4HANA in regard to the Worksoft product?
No, it works with Certified 10, it works with 903, 902. Those have been around every year, and we work just fine. Yeah, no specific upgrades required.
Okay. Does the Certify Impact product also identify Z transaction codes?
Yes. So if it's part of your transport analysis, if it comes up in the transport, your Z transactions would show up. So yeah, because there would be a change that is moved by a transport. Yep.
I understand that Worksoft moved recently to release Certified 10. Are there any changes in the Impact product which moved to Certified 10?
Yeah, so with the Operations Suite and Impact 10, there's been some great performance improvements. In the past, when you activated so you queried for a list of transports, we then launched the transport analysis. So then you had to wait for the transport analysis to do its work and then come to the next page. Now what happens is we analyze the transports in the background. So it's configurable, but most people have it set for every 15 minutes. We look for new transports moving into the QA system, and we pre-analyze them. So that way the workflow from the user's perspective is select the transport, get the immediate result, and then figure out my risk, versus launching a batch job in the middle. So that was the big architecture change between 9.2 and 10.0 for Impact.
Okay, our next question. We're a current certified customer for end-to-end testing across multiple environments. Do you have to use Certify for automated testing in all environments in order to take advantage of Impact?
Yes, because we do map we do look at your certifying processes to figure out the SAP programs and objects and T-codes that are being tested. So we need a certified process to go and interrogate that through. If you use something, say, like Selenium for Web UI, you actually don't have that data for us to query.
All right, and we do have time for a few more questions. As a reminder, you can use the question feature to submit those. Our next question, in a typical implementation scenario, so I'm assuming that means a new implementation, how is risk-based testing used, or would you even use that approach at all?
I think it doesn't matter if you have 5,000 automated tests or 5 automated tests. Understanding what's in a transport and how large it is, and then there are T-codes that it's doing, there's value in that to start with. So just because you get a transport, it's going to be transport 9,426. Well, you need to understand what's in it. So actually running impact analysis, at least surface your T-codes so you know what modules it's using, and then you could probably guess that I do or do not use those T-codes would be helpful. And then as you build your automation libraries and start getting overlap of those, you actually get more automated in your risk-based testing approach.
Okay, we have time for just a couple more questions. Can Impact highlight the objects affected in the Worksoft database with the affected T-code?
Yes. So right now what we do is we surface the certified processes to you so you know what to run, versus showing you like which step in the process would object. So what the tool does is we know what objects changed, but we give you is a certified process that executes that object or exercises that object. So when we visualize it, we keep it at the process level itself.
Okay, and our final question. I've heard quite a bit lately about Worksoft Annalise. Can you explain a little bit more about what that is?
So Annalise is a really cool system. It does process discovery. So what we found is when people are building automated tests, or maybe they're going through a merger and acquisition, or they're doing system consolidation. We found a lot of people are consolidating multiple ECC6s into one SD or one simple finance. They need to understand what their existing business processes are first so they can figure out if they want to go to a greenfield implementation with that customization, what is their existing as-is business state, and then map those to the new processes, say in HANA or S4HANA. So our process discovery engine can work with mining SAP data through business process mining. We can do it through our capture technologies, our passive capture technologies, and then Annalise takes that and visualizes that for you. It shows you your variance in your business processes and actually shows you how many people are running the same types of business processes and consolidates them. So Annalise is all about business process discovery and then using that knowledge to help you do intelligent things like manage a consolidation better, or say manage a greenfield upgrade to HANA, but you need to understand what your three, SC modules for ECC6 are doing. It does have a great visualization engine, so your test coverage and your impact analysis and your SCO3 data can actually be visualized and shown in Annalise itself through heat map capability. So it's our business process discovery. We're certified in the operations suite like Impact, Execution Manager, BPP. They're all about business process automation and end-to-end testing.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you to everyone for attending. If we weren't able to get to your question, we'll be in touch with more information. As mentioned earlier, we will be sending you a link to a recording of this webinar. And if you're interested in learning more about Worksoft, please visit our website. Thank you for your time today. This concludes the webinar. Have a great day.